So our second snippet for this week looks at the later Bush years, 2005 to 2008. Oops, I don't want that. Where social issues are playing an increasingly prominent role. Bush is a devout evangelical Christian himself. He gets strong support from evangelical Christians. They're concerned with what they see as the moral progress of the country, and this is an administration, especially from 2004 2008 or so, is pushing the envelope with regards to social issues. And three, I think, really stand out. The first is it's an awful case. In Florida, it's called the Terry Shivo case, and this was a woman in Florida who had a stroke and was left in a vegetative state, but still alive. She was married. Her husband, seeing her suffer, she's kept alive by feeding tubes. Wanted to. She didn't leave a living will, which was critical here. Wanted to pull the just to stop the feeding. Her parents were devout Catholics, and in the eyes of the parents, the husband's activities, amounted to murder under Catholic doctrine. But a sort of cardinal principle of American family law is that in cases like this, the spouse makes the decision. The parents go to court to try to seek to have themselves declared custodial agents of their daughter, allow them to make the medical decisions and not the husband. The courts say no. Then there are efforts to push through a law in both Florida, which is where they live, and in the U.S. Congress to give the parents authority to supersede the husband's desires. And this culminates in this really just embarrassing item from the floor of the Senate. This is a clip from Bill Frist. Frist at this point is the majority leader of the U.S. Senate. He's a Republican senator from Tennessee. He's about to step down. He doesn't run for re-election in 2006. But Frist is also a doctor by training, and he's seen the question in the Shivo case, at least the nominal question in the court cases, is whether the diagnosis that she's in a vegetative state and could never come out of it is the accurate diagnosis. And her doctors say it is, the husband say it is, the parents say no. So the parents put together a video which Frist then analyzes, and he gives his medical diagnosis or quasi-medical diagnosis on the floor of the Senate.
Mr. President, I will be very brief. I had the opportunity to talk to a number of my colleagues. As most people know, this is coming to the floor very quickly, and the real fundamental reason is if we don't act, there's a good chance that a living human being would be starved to death in a matter of days. And that's why the action now, that's why we're not rushing things, but deliberating quickly so we can get this to the House of Representatives. She'll be starved to death next Friday. I've had the opportunity to look at the video footage upon which the initial facts of this case were based. And to my standpoint as a physician, and I would be very careful before I would come to the floor and say this, that the facts upon which this case were based are inadequate. To be able to make a diagnosis of persistent vegetative state, which is not brain death, it's not coma, it's a specific diagnosis, typically takes multiple examinations over a period of time because you're looking for responsiveness. I've looked at the video footage. Based on the footage provided me, which were part of the facts of the case, she does respond. That being the case, and also recognizing she's not had a complete neurological exam by today's standards, allegedly she's not had a PET scan or an MRI scan. Not that those are definitive, but before you're going to have somebody die and starve them, you want a complete exam and a good set of facts for the case upon which you make that decision. All we're doing today is saying don't starve her to death now, forever, I would argue, but establish facts based on medical science today and then make a determination in the future. And that's what we'll accomplish upon passage of this bill.
The Shivo bill ultimately has not passed The husband retains, control over her medical decisions. She does pass away. There is an autopsy done. The autopsy confirmed that she, in fact, was in a vegetative state. Doctors were correct. Frist was not. This is an odd case politically in that the Bush administration and House and Senate Republicans are responding to very strong pressure they're getting from conservative Catholics and evangelical Christians, important parts of their coalition, to act to save this woman's life. That's the framing. But the broader public, there's an extraordinary backlash to this, almost a 3-to-1 negative view of what Congress is doing, because in effect, a lot of married people are looking at this and saying, if the worst possible thing happens in my marriage and my spouse, is in a vegetative state, are we going to have a situation where Congress comes in and seizes decision making from me? So this is one of probably the highest profile of the socially conservative initiatives of the Bush administration that work to their disadvantage. And this is a pattern that we're going to be seeing, I think, more in the Obama and especially in the Trump years, where public support for socially conservative positions diminishes. Second big socially conservative issue that emerges during the Bush years is late-term abortion. And here, in a case called Gonzalez versus Carhart, the Supreme Court upholds an abortion restriction. So this dealt with a federal law called the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act. So it's a type of late-term abortion which Congress had outlawed, and up until this point, the Supreme Court in Planned Parenthood versus Casey and in subsequent decisions had said that making it more difficult to obtain an abortion sometimes would not constitute an undue burden, but states could not prohibit any kind of abortion. In Carhart, it's 5-4. Kennedy is as you can see, is the justice who writes the opinion. Here, the Supreme Court says that if the legislature can make a strong enough case, certain kinds of abortions can be types of abortions can be eliminated. So this is a very important case in terms of eroding at least some of the foundation of Planned Parenthood versus Casey and making it more likely that red states are going to continue to try to push the envelope on the issue of abortion. And then the third big social issue of the Bush years is gay rights, and there are two key issues. The first is Bowers, and the second is same-sex marriage. So Bowers, remember, Bowers was the case where the court in 1986 had said that if a state wants to criminalize gay sex, they can consensual private intercourse between two adult men in their home, that the state can do so, that doesn't violate the Constitution. And then in this case called Lawrence versus Texas, the issue is returned to the court, and it's a bizarre factual case where the police are serving a warrant and barge into an apartment. There's a guy sitting outside the apartment. He says you can go in. He sees they see these two men. There's actually some debate about whether they were having intercourse at the time, but in any case, they're arrested for violating Texas's anti-sodomy statute. And gay rights groups they've been trying to overturn Bowers, and this is just the perfect case factually for them. The case makes it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, by a vote of 6-3, with Justice Kennedy again writing the key decision for gay rights, says that Bowers is overturned, that it wasn't correct when it was decided, and then has this very broad opinion that says, look, the Due Process Clause, the 14th Amendment, we can't judge it on the basis of what the framers might have thought about homosexuality in 1787 or in 1868 when the 14th Amendment was ratified. Instead, in this famous line from Kennedy, they knew times can blind us, he's speaking of the framers here, to certain truths, and later generations can see that laws once thought necessary and proper in fact serve only to oppress. And the key holding of Lawrence is that laws that are based simply on a moral disapproval of homosexuality are automatically are unconstitutional. This triggers a furious dissent from Justice Scalia, who accurately, it turns out, predicts that by making this holding, the Supreme Court has set the standard for the legalization of same-sex marriage nationally. So it's just what we saw in Romer, where Kennedy outlines this very broad opinion in favor of gay rights, and Scalia writes this furious dissent in opposition. As this is occurring, actually a few months after Lawrence, the state of Massachusetts becomes the first state in the country to legalize marriage for gay and lesbian couples. This is a decision that is before the state courts, not before the federal court. So the Supreme Court doesn't have the right to view its interpretation of the Massachusetts state constitution, which is very, very broad on constitutional rights. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court analogizes the states making marriage illegal to what Colorado did in Romer versus Evans, that case that we looked at this week. The then governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney, now a senator from Utah, Romney gets around, strongly opposes this decision. He tries to find ways around it, but ultimately Massachusetts legalizes same-sex marriage in 2004, just at the time that the junior senator from Massachusetts, John Kerry, is the presidential nominee. And Kerry is put in a bind by this decision. Same-sex marriage is still quite unpopular in terms of polling. He says that he opposes the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court opinion, but he also doesn't want it reversed, and that he's not comfortable with gay and lesbian couples marrying, but that he's okay with them having civil unions. This is one of a series of issues that becomes the subject of this very famous ad by Bush's chief political advisor, Karl Rove, which shows this photograph of Kerry on a windsurf, and the tagline is that John Kerry, he goes whatever the way the wind blows, and the argument is that he doesn't really have any core principles. And it's a devastating image because it does seem to describe how Kerry approaches it. Rove also sees same-sex marriage as an issue to energize Christian conservatives. And as a result, Republicans put onto the ballot state constitutional amendments. Now same-sex marriage was already illegal in all of these green states, but they put on state constitutional amendments to ban same-sex marriage, put that ban in the state constitution. And these amendments get approved everywhere, including in states, Oregon, Michigan, that we would consider kind of liberal today. Georgia goes to Joe Biden in 2020, but 76% of voters in Georgia in 2004 vote to put a same-sex marriage ban into the state constitution. And eventually a majority of states will adopt similar state constitutional amendments. One of the distinctions between the battle for same-sex marriage and basically every other civil rights issue, civil rights, civil liberties issue in American history is that the bans on same-sex marriage were constitutionalized. Even in the Jim Crow era in the South, the southern states tended to put, say, interracial marriage bans into the state constitutions, but these bans were statutory bans that were not constitutional bans outside of the South. So this is something kind of unique, but it does work. The issue energizes Bush voters. Bush carries Ohio, which is the critical state in 2004, in part because conservatives get out to vote. And the fight for same-sex marriage seems to grind to a halt after Massachusetts, the only state that allows it. And then suddenly in 2008, California, the most populous state in the country, passes a law. Passes a law banning same-sex marriage. That law is then overturned by the state Supreme Court, again using the California state constitution, so it can't be appealed to the Supreme Court. But California, as we know, has this very liberal referendum policy where you can go and get measures overturned, and the result is a measure called Proposition 8. Which reverses the decision of the California Supreme Court and rebans same-sex marriage. And this is an interesting campaign. It's a very expensive campaign. The Mormon Church leads the financial opposition to the campaign, but they organized the campaign by targeting breakaway groups within the Democratic coalition. Suburban mothers, the sort of advertising emphasis behind the campaign is that allowing gays and lesbians to marry will affect educational issues that will be taught in the public schools, and that will remove parental control over education. And African American voters who tend to be disproportionately religious, and there's a pretty close correlation between religiosity and opposition to same-sex marriage. And in this campaign, the proponents of Proposition 8 use the rhetoric of Democratic presidential nominee Barack Obama, who said that he was not in favor of gay marriage. Obama is a unique figure in American politics. He is the only member of the Senate in 2008 and the only national legislator or ultimately president to favor same-sex marriage. Obama had actually issued a statement in the 90s saying that he had favored it, changed his mind and say that he opposed it, and then changed his mind again to say that he supported it. This is, he's running for president. He has to take a position that's in line with popular opinion, and ultimately Proposition 8 is passed very narrowly. In California, you can kind of see pretty clear breakdowns here. So the first comes with regards to age. Older voters, the no is the kind of blue bars on this chart. Older voters tend to oppose same-sex marriage. Younger voters, the opposition to Prop 8 is in green, tend to favor. And then the demographic breakdown as well. So very close vote among Asians, among whites, among Latino voters, but African American voters overwhelmingly support Proposition 8, and the measure is very narrowly approved. The measure ultimately will be reversed by a federal constitutional challenge. So the federal court reinstates the California opinion. But the net result here is that we have these social issues, the Shivo case, abortion, gay rights, and then ultimately same-sex marriage, where conservatives, although they seem to be on the defensive, are still scoring some victories during the Bush years. And the question is, how is that going to change during the Obama years? So that is it for our second snippet for this week.